Hi guys, welcome back to Industry Week. I can't believe ours our 7th guest this week and our last VFX and animation guest. So yeah, saving the best till last, Al, no pressure. But yeah, it's been a fantastic week so far, and I hope you've all like really enjoyed it and got involved and been tweeting and Instagramming and all those things. But yeah, Alistar, it's my last one, so I'm going to get it all wrong. Alistar Darby, I'm going to call him Al. He's a build generalist who's worked on 2 Oscar-winning movies, Inception and Machina, I always say it wrong. He's going to be talking to us today about what got him interested into VFX in the first place, and then his journey from school to becoming a seasoned build artist. So we're going to hear all about him today. I'm really excited to find out more. Please use the link in the chat function to ask all your questions. There's going to be a little like Google form link in there, and then I'll ask those at the end for as much as we've got time for anyway. We'll see how it goes. A massive thank you, Alistar, for joining us. It's really, really kind of all of our guests to spend so much time with us this week, and the students massively appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you on their behalf too. Also, guys, it's Thursday. We've still got some events tomorrow. Russell T Davies, you can't miss that. That's going to be insane. So make sure you still book onto some events for tomorrow because it's still going to be a really good day. So if you want to book any more events, just remember to go to the iw.confetti.ac.uk website and book onto those. Keep tagging, like I said, Twitter and Instagram, you might win some prizes. That's it from me. So I'm now going to hand you over to Alistar, not Alex. I'm just rubbish today. I'm going to say everything wrong, so I'm going to shut up. But Alistar, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous, but thanks very much for having me. I am currently teaching at Middlesex University, and I very kindly got invited to partake in this event. I feel a little bit of pressure being that Russell T Davies is on tomorrow, so yay. But yeah, I'll try and share my screen and hope there's no huge cock-ups, but we'll see how it goes. So if you just bear with me a second, let's see if this works. I hope everybody can see that. My talk is from digital artist to VFX generalist and back again. So let's go through. So just to give you a quick brief background, I'm a CG generalist, focusing mainly on hard surface modeling and texturing. So that's things like vehicles and buildings and things. I have done a little bit of character work here and there, but my main interest lies in architecture and cars and things like that. I've worked 12 years as a CG artist, starting back in 2008. As a runner, actually. My background is actually in computer and digital arts. That was my area of study at university, because at the time that wasn't, I suppose, animation was kind of making its way into the mainstream as a course. But I've also done teaching 3D, web design, Photoshop, and I've also done a little bit of freelance 2D kind of work for a couple of smaller companies. So yeah, that's just a brief background. So just to kind of give you an overview of who I am, what my passions are, all that kind of stuff. Going right back to when I was a small person, I was really into drawing. I would always be sitting around with crayons and pencils, sketching all the way through school. I entered competitions. I won one competition where it was to do with, I think, at the time there was a big thing about, I suppose, the ozone layer and this big hole in the ozone layer. And I ended up winning a competition drawing a tiger to kind of bring awareness to, I suppose, yeah, the use of things like CFCs and petrol fumes and all this kind of stuff. So it kind of I always felt like I was being spurred on into this artistic realm. But then I got a computer, and when you get a computer, obviously things start changing and your interests change a little bit. And going right back, the first computer I had was an Amiga 500. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of those or had one of those, but I had a computer program called Deluxe Paint 2. And I used to just sit and I'd have a mouse and I would just draw little pictures. Usually it was Sonic the Hedgehog or something Star Wars related. And yeah, so I was really into computers. I was really into art. I've also, you know, being a creative, and I'm sure there are other people in the same kind of realm, I'm really into my music. I think quite often you find that people who are generally artistic will have a passion for music and art and computers and anything that they can kind of create and produce things. So I've been in bands over the years, some fairly, I suppose, locally successful, others not so much. I'm really into TV and movies, obviously, or otherwise I wouldn't have got into movies, particularly the sci-fi genre. But I think Star Wars is one of the Star Wars and Jurassic Park are probably my two main inspirations in life. And I'm slowly getting. I've got a 4-year-old son who I'm really getting into Jurassic Park at the moment. So yeah, hopefully he'll be a similar kind of ilk. And yeah, and as I say, music, rocking out. I was in bands over the years performing. I kind of went a little bit off the rails in my kind of late teens, so moved away from the kind of the geeky angle of life that I was kind of going down, and ended up going down this more rock music orientated direction. And yeah, so university came along after completing my A levels, and as I say, I was a little bit off the rails during A levels, but I needed a backup, and it was very much instilled in me that I needed a backup just in case rock stardom didn't take off and I didn't kind of make it onto the stage at Glastonbury. So I ended up going to what is now the University of West London, what was then London College of Music and Media. And I started to study it was a degree in digital arts with a minor in animation. So there was a lot of emphasis on the kind of more artistic side of things. Certainly, a lot more experimental work. And I suppose, unlike with a lot of animation, I had to be very particular about the styles that I did, as well as the meaning behind the work. So yeah, I went down this art route. But as I was at university, I kind of got into a group of friends who you can see in the image there as we all graduated. They were really into computer games, and they were really into film, and it rekindled my love of films and animation and general geekdom. You know, we'd go down to Forbidden Planet shopping and buying figures and all kinds of things like that, reading comics. We used to have games where sometimes you'd have study sessions where we'd all get together to do animation together, we'd have laptops and we'd sit there doing these things. And at the same time, occasionally we'd go off and, play video games, usually Super Mario Kart. So yeah, I went down that route, and I think it was relatively successful. I thoroughly enjoyed the course. And it got to the end of the course, and I graduated, and I didn't know really what I wanted to do. And so I moved home, which was in Warwickshire in the Midlands. So from London back to Warwickshire. And it just so happened that I had a friend who was also a teaching assistant, who told me that the university was actually looking for teaching assistants, and that I should apply. And obviously that meant a move back to London. But I thought, well, if I don't try something, then I don't know really what I'm going to do. I'd applied for a few jobs in a few studios, but I'd not heard back anything. So I ended up going for the job teaching, and it basically came along with the ability to study for a master's degree. And so I picked computer arts because it was a fun kind of natural follow on, I suppose, from the digital art degree. And I was able to present my work as kind of a part of a showcase, which was, I think it was down in Brick Lane in London. So, huge event with loads of students demonstrating their work. And it, as I say, it was very arts focused. So there were no kind of cool animations in the sense of filmic. It was much more, I don't know what the word is, like emotive, maybe. I think the one I did was called Trapped Inside, and I was really interested, as somebody that had surgery when I was younger, I was really interested in the idea of what's it like to be, I suppose, trapped inside your own body when, you know, you're sedated. And I did a lot of research into things like coma patients and locked-in syndrome and all these kinds of things. And yeah, that was kind of that took me to the end of the masters, and I continued teaching as a teaching assistant. But a friend of mine, Josh, who now also works at Middlesex University, he and I kind of carried on teaching together, and it got to a point where I felt like I needed to get some, I suppose, some industry experience. You know, I'd done 3.5 years as a teaching assistant. I'd written or co-written courses with my friend Josh and a few other guys. And I just thought, well, at this point, I really need to go into the industry and see really what it's all about. And so, yeah, I basically, I started applying for various jobs while I was teaching. I got a couple more teaching, I suppose, teaching jobs, but in further education, so working in colleges. So I worked in the West Herts College, which is in Watford, and I worked in Ealing College. So at this point, whilst I wanted that industry experience, I wasn't sure where it was going to take me. So I thought, you know, I'll do some of this teaching. And I also managed to get some 2D work, working as a freelance 2D designer. I did some freelance work in web. I suppose it was a web company, because at the time Wi-Fi was making a big leap, I suppose, in technological development. And I just happened to have a contact who put me in contact with this guy who just set up his own Wi-Fi installation company. So I did a big event in Manchester, where I was doing all the kind of 2D design work for him. And then I got a job for the Dixon's Group, which is kind of Curry's and PC World. And I did a little bit of work for those guys, which was, oddly enough, it was designing warning signs for their staff. So at this point, I thought, you know, I'm going into an industry route, but I'm going down a 2D route. And while I was doing this, I was, you know, fiddling around a bit with 3D at the same time while I was teaching and doing this and studying for my masters. And in the end, it came to a head, and I thought, right, I need to choose 2D teaching or 3D, and I chose 3D. So I got into contact with a friend of mine who happened to have just got a job as a tech runner working at what was then Double Negative in London. And very, very quickly, I did a jump from the teaching into the industry, so working at Double Negative. And I started out as a runner. So this was back in 2008. It's February 2008, so 13 years ago. And I wasn't, at the time, I wasn't entirely sure what jobs were available in an industry setting. So I was teaching the subject, and I knew the subject matter. I knew Maya, and I knew how to use Photoshop, which was at the time the texturing tool, but I hadn't had any experience with what kind of jobs were actually available within the industry. So I started out as a runner, which is really, it's a very, I suppose, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an introductory level, really, where you are effectively running around. At the time, I was running around London with reels of film under my arms. I was delivering things like hard drives full of, video footage and things. I was, I suppose, doing things like making sure that the kitchens were clean, all those kinds of jobs. But it wasn't the most glamorous job, but it had a lot of benefits. And as it says here, it came with a lot of opportunities. So I was able to see how the company functions. I interacted a lot with the top brass of the company, I suppose. So that, you know, the CEOs, the management, the VFX supervisors. I got to know a lot of the artists, weirdly enough, while I was cleaning kitchens, and they would, you know, they were nice enough to chat to you while you were kind of doing that. You also had the opportunity to get a good reputation within the company for being a hard worker. You know, you'd be putting in quite a few hours, and you would also train in the evenings in the relevant software. So I do my full 8-hour day, and then I go and find a computer and work into the evening, normally until about 11 o'clock. And the other thing is that I was not personally, but as runners, the group of us were the face of the company. We were, I suppose, some of the first people that anyone coming into the company would see and meet. So we had to have a certain attitude about us. We had to be confident, but at the same time, we had to be, you know, not overconfident. And, you know, we had interactions with quite a lot of high up people within the film industry. So at the time, you know, I was doing my running. I was training in 3D Equalizer, which was the match move software we used. I was training in PF Track, which was another piece of software. And just to give you an idea of some of the highlights that I had as a runner, just because it obviously is, you know, it is an introductory level job, but there were some really, you know, cool moments as a runner. So I got to attend all the wrap parties. So at the end of every single film, we'd have a wrap party, and there was food and drink, and you got to mingle with all the other guests and all the other artists. So again, it was giving you that opportunity to meet people and you know, hopefully get I suppose, a rapport with the other artists, so that they might come to you if they need something. Probably the best thing that happened as a runner was when I got to buy Matt Damon beer. He was in for, I don't even know what reason it was. He was in for a film, I think, just for a screening of something, and there happened to be no petty cash in the petty cash tin. So I had to take it out of my pocket and go and buy him a pack of 6 Budweisers. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him, but I did get him beer. So one day I will call him out on that. An anonymous director said I made the best cup of tea ever. I've got a feeling it might have been Edgar Wright, but I'm not 100% sure. He was in quite a bit. And then we had a really nice email right at the end of Hellboy 2. We had a lovely email from Guillermo del Toro, who basically just said that everybody had done a stellar job, and, you know, keep up the good work, and he hopes to be back and to see everybody again. And it was just a really nice experience to get something from the director, even though I was only a runner. You know, it made me feel valued, and it made, you know, I think it's that thing that you feel as a runner that, well, I'm still at the bottom of the ladder, but when you get something like that, or where you interact with people who are, you know, big directors, or even the VFX supervisors, or even other artists, you just feel that real sense of accomplishment. Actually, I'm meant to be here. There's something that's going to come from this. So that was my running experience. And as I said, I trained in 3D Equalizer and PF Track. And I was lucky enough that I'd talked to a guy who was a match move supervisor on Quantum of Solace, the James Bond film. And he basically gave me a shout one day and just said, Alistar, I've got some shots that I'd like you to have a stab at. Because I'd been going to him with my training shots just to see, you know, where I could improve. And I ended up doing 5 shots for him, all of which he was really happy with. And then I got the email come through saying, Alistar, we'd like you to move up into match move. And so I ended up working on over 30 shots for Quantum of Solace. So for anybody that's unaware of what match move actually is, just because, you know, it's one of those things, I don't know if you don't really see a match move within a film, but it's where you're tracking the camera movement. So you're effectively, you've got your 3D camera in your world space, and you're putting points onto the plate, onto the kind of film screen. And as you put the points on, you then hit solve button, and hopefully it will give you an idea or precise movement for the camera within the shot. Obviously, as technologies come along, things have changed a lot, but that it still applies now. People still do match moving. And it is still an introductory level job. It's, it's really, really important. The key to a good match move is that you don't see it. It's very, very well hidden. If you watch any film with CG in, every shot will be tracked, every shot will be match moved. And hopefully if the CG isn't shaking, then you know that a match move artist has done their job correctly. So as I say, I was working with PF Track and 3D Equalizer, but we did also have in-house tools. And it turned out the in-house tools were vital in the role. What I found was that after about 6 months, I was very, very comfortable with using all the match move tools. But there are some shows or some films that I found there were issues around, and I know that a lot of other people had exactly the same problems. So as I've got here, the hardest shots that I worked on, I don't know if you've seen The Boat That Rocked, but The Boat That Rocked, every shot in that was a nightmare because it was on boats in the sea. And so trying to track water is impossible. So you'd be looking for little clouds or things in the sky that you could track. The end of Sherlock Holmes as well, with Robert Downey Jr. That was an incredibly difficult sequence because it was filmed with a lot of green screen and there wasn't much to track. And one shot in particular, I think, took me about a month and a half because it was Robert Downey Jr. walking along the bridge, but it was very, very close up on his face. So we didn't have anything to track really. So yeah, very, very difficult shot. Angels and Demons with Tom Hanks, another difficult one because they were using a reference camera, which is a camera that sits on top of the camera. And it was done like that because at the time it was filmed in a set that was mimicking one of the big squares in Rome. And he was walking amongst the crowds. And so there was, again, nothing to track. So the reference camera on top was going to give us that ability to track the points on the green screens. And then the other one was Green Zone. There are a lot of nighttime shots in Green Zone. So that's the Matt Damon film, which is probably why he was in Buying Beer. But the nighttime shots in particular were really, really difficult. There were a lot of explosions, a lot of fast-paced shaking. And the director, Paul Greengrass, has a wonderful habit of shaking the cameraman who is also shaking the camera. So you've got two levels of shake on the camera. So that was incredibly difficult to track. But I did match move for about a year. And then I got the call to move up to the 3D, I suppose, 3D generalist role. So a 3D generalist is somebody that basically just does a bit of everything that's 3D related. In my case, I started with lighting, going right back. I think my first film as a lighting artist was on Scott Pilgrim. And I did a couple of films as a lighting artist. Then on, I think must have been John Carter, I think, I did what's called it's shot sculpt. So shot sculpt is basically where you have a character that's moving around, or an animal or creature of some kind that's moving around, and you're effectively just squashing bits in to make it react more realistically to its environment. So if you've got a hand that impacts a surface, you get a bit of a squash. And so shot sculpt is all about adding that squash. Not everything can just be done with a rig. And then I did Man of Steel in 2012, which was a dream. That was, as a child that grew up in the 80s and 90s, Superman was my superhero. He was the one I wanted to be. I wanted to work on a Superman film. The first film I saw when I was 5 at the cinema. I was 5 years old, a friend's birthday party. We went to see Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. Not the greatest film in the world, but it is, it really, to work on Man of Steel was a dream come true. And I moved into the modeling side of things. And while I was modeling, I was working on, planes. I was working on cars, tons of different things, buildings. And then I got the opportunity to learn a new bit of software, which had only really just come out, which was Mari. So this was a texturing software. And I happened to be sitting next to somebody who was unbelievably good at texturing, and she ran me through everything I needed to know. And I don't know why, but I just fell into that software and I loved it. It became the piece of software that I wanted to associate myself with. So I did everything I could to try and move into more of a texture role. And fortunately, after working on Man of Steel, I was able to work on Thor as a texture artist. And I think one of my biggest achievements in VFX was that on Thor 2, I was able to, I was the artist that basically came up with the idea for the look of the dark elf ship. So I think they'd been through 8 or 9 iterations, and the director just wasn't happy with what was being produced. And I think I did two or three, and I won't take all the credit because it was a collaborative effort, and it was what I was doing was built on top of what other people had done previously, but I was able to effectively come up with a design that the director was happy with. So in Thor 2, what you see is that. And yeah, so I worked on Thor, and I was using Mari. I was using, I think, Nuke was another one. I think we'd moved from Shake, which was the compositing software, into Nuke, which was kind of a newer bit of software. And I was using Maya, and I then kind of hit a little snag, I suppose, and there were a few kind of issues at home, and I ended up moving on to Paddington because it was going to be a kind of a slower pace. But actually it ended up being fantastic. Absolutely loved working on Paddington. And the guy who was the VFX soup on that film was the same guy from Scott Pilgrim, so I got on really well with him. Then I moved on to Exodus, which was absolutely crazy. Nothing was working on that film, and it was a lot of long hours. But then I got an email basically telling me I was moving on to Interstellar, and if you've seen Interstellar, it's the Matthew McConaughey black hole, big blockbuster film. And I went on it for 2 weeks. I was file sorting, and then I received an email telling me I was moving on to Ex Machina, and I wasn't happy about that. I was, very upset. I was going to be a texture artist on Interstellar, and now they were telling me I was going to be moving into lighting on Ex Machina. And so I moved on to Ex Machina and immediately felt very, very welcome on the film. The production assistants and the VFX soup was the same guy from Paddington again and Scott Pilgrim. And so having that rapport with him, I felt like I could ask him questions, and it just so happened that they also needed people to be doing modeling and texturing and effects. And so on Ex Machina, I ended up actually being a bit of an all-rounder, and it wasn't just lighting. And I ended up leading the shot sculpt on that film as well. I think I did about 40 or so shots of shot sculpt and about another 45 lighting shots. It's the only film in my whole career so far where I've done a shot start to finish. So where I've taken a shot from inception, no pun intended, but I've gone from the inception of working with taking the plate, tracking it, I added some effects in there. I did some modeling the skull. It's a shot where one of the robots gets their jaw smacked off, and I basically did everything in the shot, and I was really happy with it at the end. I worked through loads of films as a generalist. I don't want to obviously bore you with everyone, but you can see there, on the page that there are quite a lot of films there. But yeah, I had a few personal highlights. So winning the Oscars on Inception and Ex Machina were two big ones. Inception, I was working as a modeler primarily. I did a little bit of texturing, but we won the Oscar for that, and then we won the Oscar for Ex Machina, which is the highlight of my career purely because we beat Star Wars. So it absolutely fantastic. I had some very good praise from Edgar Wright on Scott Pilgrim for my lighting. And then I I've worked on 3 James Bond films to date. On Spectre, I was able to texture Blofeld's helicopter, which was superb. Really enjoyed that. And then the last film I worked on at DNEG officially was No Time to Die, which is the latest Bond film, which hasn't even come out yet. But you know, all in all, working as a generalist was fantastic. It's, you know, you meet so many cool people, you get to work with a lot of cool people. There's so much opportunity to train in new software, learn new tips and tricks just from people that you're sitting around. It's really, really interactive in that way. And, you know, there are a lot of parties and, you know, particularly at the end of the day where people go down the pub and just chat. Lunch times where you just sit in the kind of in the kitchens together and just talk about what you're working on, or talk about things totally unrelated. You might be talking about, you know, your favorite films and things like that. Usually when there's a good series out, people like to debate, you know, the pros and cons of the latest series, things like Lost and the X-Files, things like that. One of the other things that I was able to work on while I was working as a build generalist was I got to second into other departments, which I wasn't entirely sure about initially, but actually it worked out being a really good experience and I really, really enjoyed it. So I worked in what's called the EndGen department, or the Environment Generalist department, which also works hand in hand with the map painting. So it kind of combines multiple skill sets where, you know, you'll be doing a bit of lighting, a bit of modeling, a bit of texturing. There's a lot more emphasis on using Nuke for projection work. And I got to second into this EndGen department when I was working on Justice League. And unfortunately, I think all but about 3 of the shots I worked on were, let's call it shelved, because Zack Snyder unfortunately kind of left the project and Joss Whedon came on and changed everything. I mean, I'm sure everybody's well aware of the Zack Snyder cut that's coming out in a few days, I think next week. Hopefully there should be some of my work in that. But yeah, I got to do quite a lot of background work on Justice League. But while I was doing that, and I was doing a lot of the modeling work and the texturing. So I got to kind of see the whole gamut of what can be done on a film when it comes to 3D modeling, texturing, look dev, so doing the shader work, things like that. I had a friend of mine who's a supervisor at DNEG still, and he was I think it was the DFX soup on Infinity War, and he ended up kind of drafting me to help him out with a few shots on Infinity War. So I got to do some matte painting for some shots in Edinburgh. It was the top of a church that needed kind of a digital replacement. And I also got to do, I think it was a train station, the Edinburgh train station, I think. But it was really, really good fun, really, you know, huge learning curve when you've come from just doing modeling and texturing and then suddenly you're doing all these other things. But it was absolutely fantastic experience. And, you know, it was really cool working. I think one of the great things about working in film is that you get to meet all these people, and then every so often you'll get put on a show with someone that you really click with. And my friend Dan and we've known each other for years. We both went to the same university, and it was just really good working alongside him. You know, I felt like he was someone I could go to, and he felt like I was someone he could trust with shots. So you get a really good working relationship with people. And very briefly, I also worked on Mission Impossible Fallout. So, you know, that one I was doing a lot of assets for, but again, I got asked to help out with a little bit of matte painting, and that was as simple as cliff faces, so painting rocks. But it was, you know, it was still good fun, and the team was great, and yeah, really, really enjoyed it. And actually, that's where I met. I think it was where I met Pat, who is the guy that contacted Jackie about me doing this. But Pat and I kind of sat behind one another and would regularly talk to one another about things, and yeah, really got on. It was just a really nice environment to work in. I've also had the opportunity to do a couple of TV shows. So the first one I worked on was Chernobyl. The TV department was completely separate from the film or VFX department at DNEG. They also had a features animation department, which I've never had the opportunity to work in, but the TV department needed some people to help out on Chernobyl. And so I was called in to, help with that. And it ended up being one of the best shows I've ever worked on. It was brilliant. Really liked the team I was working with. It was unbelievably harrowing to do a lot of research for it. I think from day one, I really got my teeth into the show, trying to look. I mean, I was obviously looking at reference of, what happened at Chernobyl, but I think a big part of it was looking at the interior of what happened at the nuclear power station. And some of the images and the stories you hear are really haunting. And I think it's the first time I've gone into a show that deep and really come out of it feeling quite almost slightly traumatized. I say that lovingly, I suppose. It was haunting and it was tragic, but at the same time, I enjoyed every minute of it, and it felt like something that it really made me feel like TV was something I could potentially go back into. And fortunately that came along a little bit later when I got to work on Doctor Who, and it was for the series 12 pilot or special, I suppose it was the New Year's Day special, Spyfall, and they needed somebody to model and texture planes, and they'd already had a guy who'd kind of modeled the basic plane as it was, and they needed somebody to destroy the plane. So I did that, and it was fantastic. They got to texture the plane, I think it was 5 times, so that they had some background planes as well. But it was absolutely fantastic stuff. It's a much faster workflow in TV. I think films, you tend to have a lot more time to really get your teeth sunk into working on assets. But when you work in TV, it's a very, very quick turnover. And so there's a lot of pressure on you to get things out. And so sometimes you might cut corners a little bit, but what you tend to find is that you actually find you optimize your workflow a lot better. So you start finding patterns about how, what's the quickest way to do this and the quickest way to do that. And by the end of it, I felt that my entire workflow had benefited from the faster workflow. But overall, it was unbelievably enjoyable. And I would definitely put, certainly Chernobyl is up there as one of the most enjoyable experiences I had in 12 years working in VFX. But then COVID hit, yay. Unfortunately, that meant that a lot of films and a lot of TV shows shut down shop, stopped working. And so there was a lot less work. And unfortunately, a lot of us didn't keep our jobs beyond that. And so I was made redundant last year, which is, massive shame. But what it did allow was huge new opportunities in upskilling. So obviously I've done 12 years as a build artist and lighting, match move, all these great opportunities. But the new technology that has kind of really made a name for itself recently is Unreal. And Epic, I think it was Epic Games and Escape Studios at the time decided that it would be a really good idea in collaboration with, I think it was Framestore and DNEG, it might have been NPC and DNEG, but they decided to put on a free course. And it was a 6-week course in basically taking you through learning Unreal. So I partook in that and really, really enjoyed it. We had a project where we had to recreate the introduction of Children of Men. And we had to do it entirely in Unreal. And so, I took the role of doing modeling and texturing, but obviously how to implement that within Unreal. All of this, of course, was done in the comfort of my own home because obviously, we weren't allowed to go into the office anymore. Obviously, I think towards the end of my time at DNEG, I was working from home, but certainly I think it made things quite difficult working from home when you're trying to be in a group of people you don't know and you've never actually met. But what we came out with at the end of it was what I thought was a pretty good piece of work. I got to learn some really cool new techniques in Unreal. So all in all, I think COVID has had a massive impact on VFX and film and TV in the way in which we're going to see it moving forward. I think things are going to radically change in people working from home, the types of software that's being used. I think we're going to see a big change. So I think if anything, if I could offer any piece of advice, get your head around Unreal, because that's going to be the next new big piece of software. I think Unreal and possibly Houdini as well. Houdini is a brilliant bit of software. So yeah, that takes us up to now. And basically in September, a friend of mine contacted me and they needed somebody to work at Middlesex University. And knowing that I'd had 12 years industry experience and 3.5 years teaching experience, my friend Josh, who I'd been at university with, basically put me in contact with the course leader at Middlesex University. And so I took over the second year group, and the whole year's entirely been online. And it's made me realize how much I absolutely love teaching. And particularly now I have the experience within the industry, I think it's benefited my teaching, and it's something I'm now contemplating going back into full time, because currently I'm a visiting lecturer. But I find teaching massively. I find teaching massively rewarding. Siri. Yeah, teaching's hugely rewarding. I love interacting with people. One of the big problems I think everybody has suffered with through COVID is lack of interaction with people, and I think even online teaching has given me that opportunity to go back to talking to people. As someone that I like being on stage. I like performing my music on stage with my band. I haven't been able to do that for over a year now. And yeah, I think being able to teach has made me realize how much I love that. I love the interaction, not just because I'm able to teach people, but also because I think I get a lot from speaking with students and seeing what their experiences are. And that, there's a lot of backwards and forwards interaction. It's not just one way. And I love that. It's exactly the same as it is in the industry, but it came at the best time. It's COVID. It's difficult for everyone. I felt like it's allowed me to interact with a lot of people, and also my wife had a baby last year, so that's it's been really beneficial in that way, because I've been able to be at home, kind of watching him grow. So yeah, it's fantastic stuff. And so to kind of finish with this, the future is something I'm starting to really think about, because I'm not sure where I want to go. I've done 12 years as a VFX artist, and I would say 80 to 90% of that I've absolutely loved. It's something I'm definitely contemplating going back into, but obviously if teaching things come up, then there's always that possibility, because I love teaching. I really missed it in the 12 years I was at DNEG. Even at DNEG I was writing kind of not course materials. We didn't have courses, but we had training materials. So I was doing a bit of training materials at DNEG. I certainly I'm learning Unreal slowly but surely, and I've had a go with Houdini as well. I've dipped in and out of Houdini through my whole career, but it's something I think those are two pieces of software which are hugely powerful and are going to be, I suppose, the benchmarks for visual effects in the coming years. And I think the other thing is the possibility of me experimenting with art and music, particularly after COVID. I've already, in fact, this morning my lead guitar, because I'm the lead singer in a band, and the guitarist from my band contacted me and said, right, when are we going to have a band practice? So we've already set a date for June. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Going to be more rocking, more gigs, hopefully, and yeah, we'll kind of see what happens really. But that's enough of me ranting in a nutshell. I hope that's kind of you know, given people food for thought about what what they might want to do. And yeah, has anybody got any questions basically?
Oh, bro. Can you hear me, Al?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that was such a fantastic presentation. Thank you. When I saw, I knew you worked on Chernobyl because I had a little IMDb,
Yeah.
look at you, because why not, And by the way, your IMDb is insane. Like the stuff you've worked on is actually insane. But Chernobyl, it's just the most beautiful and heartbreaking piece of TV, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just doing the research for it. I read about some really harrowing, harrowing reports. I think one of the things about the TV shows, I mean, you see this with all TV shows and films, is that quite often, just for the audience, they overplay things.
Sure.
And actually, the idea that you got a lot of these firemen who'd gone in to remove the rubble. There's the idea in the TV show where I think a lot of them die, but actually there are interviews with ones that survived on YouTube, and I'm not going to go into details, but
they must look a certain way.
Yeah, nightmare.
I just can't believe you worked on that. I just think it's seriously one of the best pieces of TV, I don't know, that I've ever seen. So yeah, huge respect from me on that. I can't believe you're now a teacher. Like, your students are so lucky. I think you need to move to Nottingham. That would be great.
I used to live in Farnsfield near Nottingham, actually.
Did you? Where were you from? Because you've kind of got an accent that I recognise.
So I was born in Walsall near Birmingham, but then when I was, I think, 11 months or something, I moved up to Farnsfield, which is near Nottingham. And then I moved at the age of 3, moved down to Warwickshire and grew up in Warwickshire.
Okay. So I was totally on the wrong lines. I'm from Devon, and I thought you reminded me of some of my friends from Devon. So you're definitely not from down there.
No.
That's sorry. I also thought you were Scottish earlier, so I'm not the best judge for accent.
Yeah, my accent's a bit all over the place because I grew up in Warwickshire, but a lot of my family are from Birmingham. Cool. And then I've lived in London on and off since 2001, I think, and now I live in Aylesbury, which is up in Buckinghamshire.
Oh yeah, so, cool.
Yeah, it's all mixed together in this.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of places there. I've got so many questions. I just want to keep asking. Although there was something you didn't talk about that the students will probably find fascinating.
Yeah.
Which is your name is on the wall of the. Is it the wall of the missing? What the disappeared?
Oh yeah, I should have. Yeah, good point. Yeah. So I obviously I said I worked on Infinity War. My friend Dan, obviously, who was the DFX soup, he was also the DFX soup on EndGen. And it so happened that they needed, I think it was I don't know if it's the actual overall director or the soup or something, said that they wanted real names on the wall of the missing, whatever it's called, this big place where they put all the names of the people that Thanos snapped out of existence.
And you were on it.
Yeah, my friend decided I think they wanted people whose surnames started with D, and he just put my name on it. And yeah, so I'm officially part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That is so cool. I love that. It's such a cool fact. Also, can we see your show reel? Did you show us your show?
Oh yeah, I didn't. I should have.
I just think why not? I want to see your work.
Should I share my screen again?
Yeah, of course. Remember with sound, if you've got sound. I always forget that button as a teacher. Like, it's my fail.
Oh yeah, I do. Here we go. Right.
While you're showing that, I'm just going to look through the questions.
Cool. Right, hope you enjoy this. And I hope it's not too loud. Let me know if it is.
Oh, sorry, guys.
There you go.
Okay, that was a bit good. Oh, that's seriously impressive. Thanks for. I just wanted to see it because I knew it would be amazing.
Yeah,
All those films.
cool.
You just reminded me as well. You worked on the newest James Bond film that hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
We had a guest in last year called Jules Foddy from ILM.
Yeah, I remember Jules.
Yeah, and
Jules, yeah.
yeah, he's such a nice guy. He's been to our last 2 industry week, like last 2 years of industry week, I remember sitting down after the talk with him in like our bar antenna that we've got here at Confetti, and he was having a pint, and I remember him saying, you know, we're ready to go with the new James Bond that is literally done.
Yeah.
But I don't know when it's going to come out, and it's still not out. I saw Jules Foddy this time last year, and he said that to me. Still not out. Are they waiting for cinematic release then?
I guess. I think that the problem is that because COVID has obviously impacted filming for certain films, they're having to redate when the films come out purely so that they don't have a sudden gap where there's nothing on in the cinemas. And so I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these films getting pushed back further and further.
Strategy.
And further.
It's all about the money.
Yeah.
I just can't believe it. You just made me think, because when I saw like that, I was like, oh my God, that was this time last year.
Yeah.
This was our last normal week last year. Isn't that strange as well? Anyway, sorry, I've got to go on to student questions. I've got to stop asking my own. Right. So Edward and Vi have asked quite a similar question. You might have already answered this, but what's been your favourite project that you've worked on and why?
Absolute favourite project. It's got to be Ex Machina. It's got to be, because I mean, it was such a small team. I think I sat in a room with maybe 12 artists in total, including myself. And we were literally, it was a really small corner room. Often the lights were off, but I think there was a desk, and there were so there were 4 of us on the center desk, and then there were desks around the edge. It was a tiny team of artists. There were a lot of match movers, I should say, a lot of people having to do the body tracking for Eva, the main robot in it. But as far as artists go, you know, there were very few of us at DNEG working on it. There wasn't, I think another company worked on another section of it, but, you know, 2 companies working on this really small, low budget film. And you felt like a family. You know, I wasn't having to do a lot of overtime. I had the guys next door who were like the supervisors I knew really well, and I got on really well with. Quite often we'd see Alex Garland, the director and the writer. He'd come in and he'd just be sitting with Andrew, just chatting, and you felt like you were part of the team. And I think sometimes on bigger projects you can kind of get lost in the noise. But getting the opportunity to work on a small project, I think if I'd have gone on to Interstellar, which was the initial plan, it would have been very different. You know, I'd worked on Inception before, and that was a huge film with a lot of people working on it. But Ex Machina was so small, and you just felt wrapped up in it. And I think that's a little bit like working on Chernobyl. I felt like I wanted to get my teeth into it.
Sure.
And you know, I was given, you know, it's the responsibilities you get given on a smaller show as well, and you feel that you have to do your very best. And you know, there's no room for error, which it's a lot of pressure, but at the same time you're surrounded by other people in the same boat, and you all bounce ideas off one another. So it's really cool. It's, you know, that for me, that and then winning the Oscar. I've got a friend who was absolutely certain that Star Wars was going to win. And
Which Star Wars was it at the same time?
Oh God, it would have been at the time, I think, The Force Awakens.
Right. Okay.
And this is a friend of mine who actually worked at ILM on Star Wars. And he said DiCaprio was going to win Best Actor and Star Wars was going to win VFX.
Right.
And he was very upset when we won.
Oh, well done.
So
it's really interesting to hear you talk about the small team and the smaller film, because it's definitely something I'm hearing from most of the people from the VFX industry, or animation as well. It's about the people, and I totally get why, because the more people I meet from this industry, the more people I'm like, oh, they're so lovely. I think Pat, by the way, is my favourite. Oh, that isn't any judgment on you.
That's
But,
cool.
oh
Pat,
my,
Pat is a lovely guy.
isn't he? And those
Yeah.
of you listening, a lot of you have met Pat. So my Pat did a talk to my FE, my college level students, and he also worked on a brief with my second year HE students. So loads of people in the call will know who Pat is, and they'll
Awesome.
totally get it. They,
He,
'cause
oh yeah,
just want
I
to
love.
cuddle
I absolutely
him.
love it. I love
Yeah,
working with Pat,
he's
and
just the best.
I hope I get to work with him again at some point.
Ah,
It's a
I bet
dream.
you will.
He's so much. He's fun. He always referred to himself as the angry Scottish guy, and he did get very. I think it was on Mission Impossible. He got very frustrated at one point with another guy in our room who was just making some decisions that Pat wasn't happy with. And in the end, I said, "Come on, Pat, right, get up off your seat. You're coming for a tea." And we ended up having tea together every day.
Amazing. Good
But
tea if you made it as well. So
yeah, oh, it's
it
brilliant.
sounds like it is all about the people, you know, and you're working on these incredible films, but you're like, I just really like that dark room with 12 of us. You know, I really like that. It's really humbling as well. So yeah, it's lovely to hear. Samuel has asked, would you suggest applying to studios, asking if they have any positions for shadowing workers or just to gain experience and see how things work in the industry? Yeah.
My advice in terms of getting into the industry, I think that there are kind of two ways you can go about it. You can look for, well, the way I went is to look for a runner position. So you can look for a runner position. You could also, I think smaller studios are probably a really good way to go. I've known a few people who've gone into larger studios as runners, and it's taken them a substantial amount of time to kind of move their way up.
Yeah.
I had a friend that was actually a runner at DNEG for quite a long time, like a couple of years.
Wow.
And there wasn't, you know, it's one of these things that when you start as a runner, often it's purely down to, you know, when those positions are available. And unfortunately, nothing came up for him. So in the end, he left and he moved to a small company. And within, I think it was 3 months, he was already commanding some pretty cool shots.
Wow.
So my advice would be generally to, I would say, try and, apply for everything, obviously, apply for what you can. But smaller companies, I think, will offer you more of an option or more of an opportunity to move up quite quickly if you want that generalist role.
Yeah. Like you'll get more responsibility at a smaller studio rather than a bigger. Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a really good piece of advice.
That's not to say, you know, you wouldn't get that at a big company as well. It's just that obviously when you're competing with, you know, hundreds of other artists, and when you don't necessarily, you know, you might not necessarily have the work coming in. Whereas I think at a smaller studio, it's a little bit like working on a smaller show.
Yeah.
It's much more everybody's in it together, and you know, you're just happy to put the graft in, really.
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
I think that's probably what I suggest.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes total sense. Chloe asks, how many people do you think get jobs through recommendations rather than going through the application process? And she mentions as well that she's got an Access VFX mentor. She asked, do you think that could increase her chances? So you talked about being recommended, didn't you? I think, Al.
Yeah, I think it depends on the position. I think in my case, I went for a runner position. So getting somebody to put a word in for me was kind of a real help. But what I noticed in 12 years of being there was that you tended, certainly as time's gone on, more and more people have come straight out of university into those junior roles.
Right.
So I think word of mouth is good. Knowing someone can help. But I think largely now what you tend to find is that companies are going for people who have the set of skills that they want.
Sure.
And so you know, it can obviously, you know, it's always going to help if you know someone, because they can say, well, I've seen this guy's work here, you know, this person's work.
I can vouch for them. Yeah,
exactly. But you know, it's not, my experience is it's not really always, you know, that I would say you maybe find 5 to 10% of people get in through word of mouth. You know,
well, that's good to know for these guys.
You know, I think it just makes sure you've got a really good kind of show reel or portfolio. And that you can always put your best work first, you know, always make sure that you know what you want to go for position wise, and make sure that your first work is your best work, because that's the stuff that they're going to look at. My show reel that you've just seen, it's very difficult when you've got 12 years to try and condense it down.
I bet, yeah.
And so I've tried to put what I think is my best work at the beginning, but you know, I've done so many different bits and pieces. I think only last week I put the Superman aeroplanes in there because I'd totally forgotten that I'd done them. And so I was like, I've got to put them in there because I really enjoyed doing it. And that, you know, that was
good, yeah.
they're quite cool. So, you know, definitely, you know, put your best work first.
Okay.
And, you know, just apply and apply and apply. I the first time I applied, I think I applied to 7 studios and didn't get any call back. And that's when I went into teaching the first time. So
wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for that. A question about match move then. So Sam says, would you recommend practicing match move a lot, as it does seem that it's quite a good way to get your foot in the door?
So I think with match move, it's one of these things where it would benefit you to know match moving purely so you understand the way that the camera, I suppose, camera in 3D world works. You know, once you can track a camera, it allows you to then film something and put your 3D objects into that film, and that's the kind of thing that's going to get noticed.
Right.
I mean, when I had my very initial show reel, it had none of that. You know, it was just model turntables. It were, you know, still images, things like that. But these days, particularly, I think, you know, there's so much cool software out there that makes it much easier to track stuff. And to be able to integrate your models into the real world, if that's the route you want to go.
Sure.
You know, if you're doing fully CG, then it's not a problem. But if you really wanted to go into the VFX route, it can really benefit you to know the you know, how do you track a camera, how do you take that camera into Maya and integrate stuff together, how do you composite it all together. So yeah,
it's something our second years do. It's a second year module at the moment for the HE students. That's cool. Probably, and I know Jake Flint's on the call and he teaches it, and I know quite a lot of the students find it really hard or don't find it as enjoyable because they do creature at the same time. So I think it's either like, make this really cool elf, or, you know, put this camera. So you know, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I really need to know that one. But yeah, totally.
I mean, it's one of those things that actually, once you know how to do it, it becomes second nature. And I would say one of the best times I ever had was as a match mover when we have there was a room at DNEG, it was room 410, and if I talk to any of my friends who were in that room at the time, we've got so many anecdotes about just the kinds of things we got up to, because we're all match movers in the room. We all knew what we were doing. We're all well experienced in it. And so it became fun. We could enjoy doing it. I think initially when you're learning it, it can be a bit slow, but once you know how to do it, it becomes such second nature that you just do it really quickly, and at the same time you can be doing other things.
You can enjoy other things as well, rather than being stuck. Yeah, exactly. No, that makes total sense. We've got a question about Unreal, and I don't know if I understand it, but that's because I'm not VFXy. But do you see Unreal Engine and Megascans having a greater impact with the development process with environment design? I think I got that right.
I think so, yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know, Unreal is a games engine, and it's been primarily used in games for, you know, years. I think 2004, maybe even before that. But so it's a games engine that very recently has started making huge leaps and bounds into VFX. And in particular, the company are working. I think the company's Epic Games, who produce Unreal, and they've produced a library called Megascans. And what they're doing is they're working in collaboration with another company who go around the world basically scanning objects in very high resolution with very high resolution textures. And the idea being that you can integrate these really high res meshes into your scenes. I mean, I've played with Megascans. I love them. They're fantastic. I do think that I think one of the last shows I worked on was Death on the Nile, and I already noticed, I mean, we were using Unreal for that because we were doing kind of it was like an interactive environment that Kenneth Branagh could kind of walk around with his tablet and see where he wanted to put the shots, you know.
Cool.
And I think with Megascans, we're going to see this explosion of people using them just more than anything to fill out their scenes. You know, I say to my students now that because I get often I get asked the question, can we use mega scans? You know, can we use stuff from the marketplace? And I say, well, you can, but remember that it's got to be a creative process as well. So I think what we'll see is just a mixture of, you know, homegrown stuff, things where you're making and building and all that, but then they'll fill out scenes with mega scans. I think that's how it's going to work. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my experience is that's the route I think it's going to go. And I did actually ask somebody a while back whether they thought Unreal would be kind of used in production actually for, you know, for films and stuff. The person I asked didn't think so. They were pretty convinced that it will only be used for kind of pre-production. I'm not so certain. I think when Unreal 5 comes out, which is, you know, this year, I think we're going to see a shift because Unreal 5 has got some amazing things associated with it. So
yeah, we're definitely noticing, speaking to a lot of people this week as well, and people we've spoken to throughout the year, that most people do think it's going to come in, but they think it might take a long time.
Yeah, I mean,
but just because it's quicker.
This is it. I mean, it's that ability to see things in real time without the constant rendering.
Definitely.
You know, I used the render software I used at DNEG was called Clarice.
Sure.
And, you know, it was real time rendering, but it was still, you know, you were waiting for the screen to kind of render stuff. But in Unreal, you don't get that. It's real time. It's like a game.
Yeah. That must be crazy, the difference. Did you do the Unreal Fellowship with Graham Bell? That name?
I don't know. I don't know if it was the Unreal Fellowship I did.
Oh, was it not the Fellowship? It's like a training thing.
No, there were two. There was the Fellowship, and then there was the it was the boot camp, the Unreal boot camp.
Oh, I see. So separate things.
I found out about the other one afterwards.
Because he worked at MPC and he also got made redundant and then quickly signed up to that, and then we got him in to talk to our students about Unreal. So yeah, cool. I just wondered. So a question from one of our tutors, and it's probably a bit of a loaded one. So how does Substance compare to Mari for texturing? Is Substance the future, or do you think the focus will still be on Mari?
So I think that Substance, I think we're going to see a bit of a back and forth, personally. I know that Mari is constantly competing now with Substance in procedural texturing, because that's the big difference. I come from Photoshop background, so when I started in VFX, we were doing Photoshop texturing.
Sure.
You know, we'd unwrap everything and then take that into, you know, take the wireframe into Photoshop, and then suddenly Mari came out and we had this ability to paint onto our models.
Yeah.
And I know there'd been a couple of programs before that you could do it, but they weren't widely used. But Mari kind of set the bar a lot higher than Photoshop. When Substance became the new thing, it set the bar even higher because suddenly you had the ability to do very, very quick procedural textures.
Right.
And so I think what we'll see is this backwards forwards, while the two of them are kind of, I suppose, competing with whose procedural stuff is the best, whose you know, whose paint stuff is the best. I personally find now I find Substance easier. Basically because it's very, very much like Photoshop.
Right.
And because I saw when I was at DNEG, we had a very big push with Substance, which there were still people that were really, you know, focused on using Mari. But that said, I know that there are these developments now with the procedural shading in Mari, which is apparently very, very good. And I've not looked at it yet, but and also
at the moment you're like, oh, which one? Like
that's it. And I think cost is another thing. You know, you know, who's gonna be more expensive, and so
it's a big deal, isn't
it?
Yeah. Oh, good answer though. So Joe asks, did you have to do some extra work on No Time to Die while it's being delayed, or like did they were like, do this again?
Did I do any extra work? I don't think so. I've got a feeling that oh no, so I don't know if this is related to it, but I did read that apparently because some of the technology is out of date now, that they've had to go back and redo some of the things like CD phones and things. But I mean, as far as I'm aware, I was doing environment stuff, so
sure.
You know, nothing I did had to be updated. I think it was, you know,
watching the phone probably.
yeah, that's it.
Nice one. Question about a concept artist from Joe again. He says, who's your favorite concept artist? Mine is Ralph McQuarrie.
I know, yeah, Ralph McQuarrie. For me, I don't know about concept artists. I love Drew Struzan's work. Okay, Drew Struzan is a guy that he did all the posters back in the 80s, stuff like Indiana Jones. I don't know if that's, I don't really know much in the way of concept artists. I know Ralph McQuarrie, obviously. I mean, the whole thing about his Star Trek ship, where it wasn't used and now it's being used in Discovery, and yeah, that's quite cool. And obviously he did the Star Wars stuff, but for me, my favorite, certainly my favorite artist is Drew Struzan, and yeah, I've had a bit of banter with him on Twitter before.
No way.
Yeah, he seems like quite a cool guy.
Oh, I'll be looking out for that. I think I know what you mean about the posters from that kind of era, but yeah, they definitely got a style.
He did, E.T. was another one he did, I think.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Kind of famous then, right?
Yeah.
So Edward asks, I think you might have answered this, and it might be unknown, but what do you hope to be able to do in the future? I guess you're between education and VFX, I'm not sure, but what would you like to do?
What would I like to be able to do?
Do you like the simpler
I'd like to move to an island.
Yeah, get away from COVID.
Yeah, I think I love VFX. I think the thing with VFX is it can be very, very intense. In a good way, it's not always bad. Sometimes there are times, Man of Steel, I think for me that pushed it to the limit, where I think I did 6 months where I was doing at least 12-hour days. At least it was between 12 and 16 hours for 6 months, and 4 of those months I was doing 6-day weeks. But that is the most I've ever done. Okay. And that was 2012. So I think things have massively improved in VFX in that respect. I think I would love to do some more VFX, and I've got a lot of friends still in VFX. But I'd also, there's a bit of me that would love to try games. I've got friends who work on games.
Sure.
I've got a mate at JagX, and another friend of mine, a guy called Sam, is just setting up a company. And he's worked on some pretty massive titles.
Cool.
I can't think of it off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of them, but
so big I can't. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, but it's like a big space battle game thing that he worked on.
Cool.
But I think it's an Icelandic company. But he's kind of sold me on the idea of maybe going into games.
Yeah.
But like I said before, I love teaching. I love the camaraderie you get with teaching and interacting with the students. There's nothing quite like being able to talk to a student and learn something from them whilst teaching them stuff.
Totally.
There's nothing like it. And so.
And have you been in a classroom yet, Al? I know it sounds stupid.
I haven't.
Yeah. See, that's even more mad. You might suddenly hate it. No, I'm joking. You won't. It's so much worse online. And I'm sure the students agree.
It's very teaching's changed. I will say teaching has changed since when I first did it. I think there's a lot more that needs to obviously be taught. But also I think honestly the caliber of students has gone up.
Yeah.
I think because there's so many tutorials now on YouTube and on ArtStation and all these other places that students have access to this whole library now of data that when I was back at university, we had books.
Yeah, I know, right?
And that was, I think we had in the last year we had the Gnomon workshop, but that was it. So
so funny. Remember when we used to go to libraries the night before a deadline and stay there all night? That was crazy. That would never happen now, would it?
No, just find the next YouTube video and try not to get distracted by cat videos.
Definitely. No, totally. The education's changed so much since I went to uni as well. I used to be so scared of my tutors as well. Whereas I think the relationship, the student and tutor relationship, is so different now as well. That's one of the biggest things that I notice. And I'm not saying it's worse or better. It's just so different.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with COVID. Some of my first year students I've still not met, which is just insane because I'm their course leader. I'm usually everywhere. And now I'm in my kitchen with my cat.
I mean, the biggest thing I found is that there are actually students who I don't know what they look like.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They've not switched their camera on.
It's so hard, isn't it? You'll really find it funny going in and actually being around people when you can look over their shoulder and see what work they're doing. And that different type of teaching, the facilitation part. And
that's it.
I reckon you'll really like that. Yeah. Let's see what else I've got here. So You kind of answered this one in terms of timing and how much work you've got to do, but what other differences are there between working for film and TV? Is it mainly about the money and the time and things like that, or are there other kind of day-to-day differences?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they are very similar. More than anything, it's the time. It's the, on film, there'd be days where nobody bothered coming to my desk and asking me how I was getting on. I didn't even necessarily get an email asking me how I was getting on. It was a lot more self-guided, I suppose. But with TV, I found the guy who, I think his name was Andrew, the guy who was my supervisor, and he came in at least twice a day to see how I was getting on. But I understand that's because obviously the turnover is so quick. Quite often they were given much shorter deadlines on TV. Other than that, I do think actually the people I worked with on TV, particularly the supervisors, I felt like they were almost more friendly.
Really? More outgoing, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's that's probably a better way to put it. More outgoing. Yeah. There's this general idea that I heard way back when I was a runner. I heard it. I mean, it's very biased. I heard it off a 2D artist who said that 3D artists tend to be a lot quieter than 2D artists.
Yes.
That is, I think that there is a truth to that. I maybe buck the trend a bit. I'm quite loud, but but I certainly in terms of supervision, I think, and maybe again it is part of the fact that when you're in films, people tend to just let you get on with it. Whereas in TV, they can't afford to do that. They have to make sure that everything's kind of, and so they have to have a better rapport with you to make sure that they're not coming on too intensely. So maybe that's it. I mean, I've only ever had a couple of run-ins with people who I've not necessarily got on with too well, but
and were they VFX or were they TV or film?
But other than that, I mean, and I say that, for the most part, even those guys, they were under extreme amounts of pressure. When they're supervisors, I can only imagine what it's like. I'm kind of senior level, whereas I can imagine for them, it's really a hell of a lot more intense. But
funny you say that though. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right.
Talking about the different types of people. So at Confetti, we have 3 different curriculum areas. We've got music students, game students, and media. And you can quite often tell what course someone is by what they look like. And then within media, we've got film students, we've got graphics, and we've got like VFX. And once again, you can tell straight away there's such a stereotype, and it quite often gets lived up to. And it's so true. I was a media and film student, so I'm more probably like the louder type, but then all my other teachers are definitely the VFX ones, and they're like, love Star Wars. Not that I don't like Star Wars. Well, I don't really like Star Wars actually, but you know what I mean? There's such a stereotype.
That's fair enough.
Just didn't watch it when I was a kid. I don't know why. My parents didn't force it down my neck, so now I'm like, oh, that green thing's a bit weird, and he says things backwards, But I think that I can really resonate with the types of people. You know what I mean? And not in a negative or positive way, just as an observation. Totally. But I know what you mean about the louder TV and film kind of people, like in your face, more like me.
It's good though. It's good that it allows for different types of banter between the groups of people. And I do think there is definitely a crossover. I've worked with a guy called Jordan Kirk actually, who absolutely superb VFX suit, who actually ended up going on and doing a game for I think on like a mobile game. I think it was like a pool game or something, and he's gone and done that now. That's his thing.
That's what so cool.
And so there's a lot of crossover. Even though obviously you can quite often tell what people are into and what they do. But I think that's what I love about it, is that if you're a creative, it doesn't matter kind of whether you're into your films or your games or TV or whatever, or music, whatever. If you're creative, generally you can all kind of muddle along together and feel like.
Totally, I agree.
It's cool.
Confetti as a kind of college and uni is definitely a special place because of that. Do you know what I mean? It's like people are really like-minded, even if they all look different or got their own little quirks. It's or stereotypes. It's still very much like a really creative hub to be in. So I totally get what you mean. There are so many questions. Bear with me. So one of them that you just said earlier about you had a 2D friend, and you kind of did some 2D illustration yourself, didn't you? Animation, sorry. What made you choose 3D? What was it that kind of Right, I'm 3D. I'm gonna go for that.
I think it was the opportunity to potentially work on films, and you know, like because the 2D that I'd done was 2D design. It was actually
Oh, okay.
it was designing posters and designing logos and things.
Ah,
And so but I mean, that being said, I had done some 2D animation at university, and I just felt like it wasn't where I wanted to go, because I love film. I mean,
yeah.
I've got, I mean, yeah, I've got loads and loads of Blu-rays downstairs, all my favorite films. And, you know, my son, I've got two sons, I've got a 4-year-old and a 10-month-old. My 4-year-old, I'm already getting him into stuff. He loves Jurassic Park. He loves
That is
Star
cool.
Wars. You know, he's
jealous.
into all that kind of stuff. And I think for me, that's the thing, is that I wanted to be able to have a go at that.
Yes.
You know, I saw Jurassic Park at the cinema in 1990, whatever it was,
Yeah.
3 or 4, and I still remember that. I still get goosebumps when you see that first dinosaur. It
Yeah.
just, oh yeah, and thinking about
I
it just
agree.
makes me. It's like a little.
Yeah.
Woo!
Where I'm from in Devon, they had there was like this random dinosaur park, like obviously fake dinosaurs, but still in it.
What was it called?
They're not real. Martin Wildlife and Dinosaur Park.
I reckon I've been there.
Wow.
That
I
really
used to
familiar.
live in Kew Martin. That's like way down there.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I remember when I went as a kid, they had the skull of the T-Rex was made from the same casts that they were in the film, and I remember just thinking, oh my god, this is ridiculous. This is the most amazing thing ever. Such a geek out moment as a kid. So I'm totally with you. I think being able to make the things that your son loves is just ultimately cool. My daughter is 4 and she does not like cool things. Like, I am so fed up of watching like the worst programs in the world.
It will happen eventually.
Yeah, I'm going to inject it in somehow. I want Harry Potter, to be honest. That I just, as long as she likes that, and the same with my son, then it's okay. I'll accept that. But I can't wait to enjoy what they want to watch. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you have to watch a lot, don't you?
There's so many things on Netflix that you just think, what
is this?
When I was a kid, I had He-Man and Transformers, and
there's literally a program for everything on Netflix for kids.
Yeah.
I want to watch something with Barbie in it. There's now like 5 different films for Barbie. Like, why has Barbie got a film? Like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Most boring person in the world, Barbie. Put a unicorn in there. That makes it a unicorn Barbie.
Yay!
Sorry, parent rant. I spent way too long with my daughter.
It's been a very long year, hasn't it?
Yeah. At least Jude's been able to go to childcare. With Maddie, I'm just like, you're still here.
Yeah.
This is quite a cool one from Louise. And I don't know if you've met that many famous people, but she says, who are the coolest celebrities that you've met in your time in the 12 years you've had?
The absolute hands down best is Dan Aykroyd from Ghostbusters.
Yes, no way. You met.
Yeah, I almost put a photo in as well. I wish I'd put a photo in my presentation, but I met Dan Aykroyd. So a friend of mine, weirdly enough, the one who didn't like the fact that we beat Star Wars, my friend Sam, he's a layout artist, and when it was a few years, I don't remember what year, 2011 or 12 or something, but he sent me a message and he said, "Oh, you've got to come with me at lunchtime. Dan Aykroyd's selling vodka." And I was like, "What?"
Oh, of course. Was that the Skull one?
It's the Skull vodka, yeah.
Such good vodka as well.
But instead of doing it in like a big shop, he'd done it in there was a little basically the place we used to go and get alcohol for the kind of directors and people, just around the corner from Dean Egg on Shaftesbury Avenue. So, and he was selling it in this place. And so at lunchtime we went down and we ended up taking a 2-hour lunch break to Kew to meet Dan Aykroyd. But I met him and he was such a lovely guy. And I think it was what shocked him most and what shocked me most. I know he's really into UFOs and kind of the occult and stuff like that. Apparently his family are all like, they used to be spiritualists and mediums and stuff, which is what got him into Ghostbusters in the first place. But I went up and I said, "Oh, lovely to meet you. You know, obviously I love Ghostbusters, but I love your work with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network."
I bet he was like, "What?"
And he was like, "Oh, you like UFOs?" And so I had a little conversation with him, and in the end, they had to shimmy me along because we were talking about UFOs in Scotland, and
I love that. That is so cool.
I mean, he's definitely he's the top one for me. I did accidentally bump into a Harry Potter director and I mean physically bumped into him when I was a runner, and I can't
Oh,
remember his name. It's
really?
Michael or Mike something.
That is cool. Did you
But
talk to them or did you just bump into them and
I
say
just
sorry?
bumped into that guy. Yeah, I mean, generally, there weren't many opportunities
Yeah,
to kind of
I get that.
interact with them. The one biggest regret I actually think was on Mission Impossible. I was off. I was off sick one day, and on that one day, Tom Cruise came in and went around the whole office and shook hands with everybody, and I missed it. Yeah, he's apparently a really nice guy. You know, regardless of the things he's renowned for, his those crazy videos. But
Yep.
he is apparently a lovely guy who actually wants to get involved and get to
So
know the
cool
artist.
though that he actually did all of that,
Yeah,
because people like him just don't have to do that, even though it's sometimes the right thing to do, go say thanks to
that's
everyone
it.
working on your film, but most people don't, especially in
Exactly.
his caliber. So yeah, that must have been bloody
Yeah.
annoying.
It was really frustrating, but yeah, it's these things happen.
They do. Oh, that was great. Talking about that vodka, this is for the older people in the room, but I remember once I went on a night out and someone said, I want that Skull vodka thing. And I was like, oh, okay, it's my round. £10 a shot of that. I remember I bought, when they said it was like 20 quid just for one drink, I was like, are you actually joking? Like, this isn't even a posh bar. Like, sorry, I just remember when I just thought of the Skull, it just gave me that rage again.
Yeah.
I think
I've never tried it.
drinks.
I've never tried
I
it.
guess, but it's just a cool bottle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Really cool.
I mean, it's supposed to be really well made.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But my friend was the guy that bought it. I actually just went, I kind of tagged along with him.
And talked about UFOs.
And talked about
Love it. Back to VFX, sorry. So Philip Day's asked, I understand from interviews, photogrammetry was used in various shots in Chernobyl, including the vehicle graveyard scene. Did you have any involvement in that? And if so, was it efficient and effective?
So on Chernobyl, I didn't do any of the photogrammetry stuff. What did we have? The stuff I did the interior of the exploded reactor room. But what I do know is that they went and shot, and we had all the reference photography. They went and shot a lot of reference photography in it's basically the kind of a sister
like plants somewhere else. Yeah.
It was the Ignalina power plant. Okay. And the guy, I know the guy that went and took all the LiDAR scans and all that kind of stuff. He, I know he had to go in the whole radiation suit, wow. And they had to check him up after, check him with the
little tick 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 thing, that amazing noise that's all the way through the program. So good.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't do any on that show. I had no hand with the photogrammetry, but on I worked on a film called The 800, which I don't know if anybody knows it. If you do know it, it's probably because you read last year that it beat Tenet financially. Wow. Tenet came out and the 800 had come out. So it was a Chinese film, and it's all about a kind of just before World War II, when this big kind of battle between the Chinese and the Japanese took place. If you can find it, called the 800, it's a fantastic looking film, but it deliberately wasn't released because apparently the Chinese Communist Party didn't want it to interfere with the celebrations for, I think it was like the 50th or 75th anniversary of China as it is today.
Sure.
And so it didn't get released, but it's coming out on Blu-ray next week. So I will be buying it because we did do a lot of photogrammetry with that. Cool. And it was unbelievably good. I mean, just because obviously, when we work in films, we use a lot of LiDAR scans. So they have a LiDAR camera that scans everything with a laser, and you get all your data. But photogrammetry is the way that works, is taking photos and then effectively from those photos building a CG set. And so for the 800, we use photogrammetry because we didn't necessarily have LiDAR scans of the real places it was supposed to be. And so we had all this photogrammetry work, and we had to get it lined up to the proxy geometry models, and we had to, it was really, really effective. I was surprised based on the fact that it was just a load of photos basically run piece of software. It was, really, really cool. But unfortunately, I can't comment on its use in Chernobyl.
Yeah. No, fair
Sadly.
enough. That's still nice to know you've worked with it and you thought it was cool though.
Yeah.
When Julian Foddy did his talk on Star Wars, a lot of it was photogrammetry, and I just couldn't believe, like, he had so many breakdowns of how all those pictures turned into mountains, and it just blew my mind. Totally blew my mind. Josh asks, is Houdini a secure specialism to look into, do you think, especially post-COVID?
Yeah, I would absolutely. I mean, that's one of my biggest regrets, is not learning Houdini from the beginning,
Right.
purely because it's become, with a lot of things moving into procedurally built, environments and things, and particularly its ability to work very, very nicely hand in hand with Unreal.
Yeah.
You've got this ability now to build something procedurally and texture it procedurally in between Houdini and Substance, and then port that into Unreal. So you have full abilities to build entire, worlds, I suppose.
Cool.
I think the cool thing with Houdini is, depending obviously what you want to get into. If you want to get into texturing, not so much, but if you want to get into modeling, it's fantastic for procedural modeling. If you want to get into effects, like explosions and stuff, or if you want to get into fluids, it is definitely the way forward.
Good. That's
But
great.
that, I mean, I say that it's not to downplay Maya's importance. Maya is still industry standard. So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the third years have a Houdini, or is it second years have a Houdini module? So that's probably why they're asking, so just to realise how cool it can be. There was a question that I just saw about being specialist or generalist. Yeah, so would you recommend, from your personal opinion, being a specialist or a generalist, or aiming towards being one of those things?
So there are two ways to look at this. The first way is, if you're really, really specialized, if you go down a specialist path, and you can focus and you can become really, really good at something. The downside of being a specialist is there might be times when there's no work for you, and so it depends on what the specialism is. Right. So I mean, in my case, I'm a build generalist, but my main focus is actually texturing. Fortunately, because of the things I'd done, I was able to occasionally second into other departments, or they'd shift me into modeling if they needed that. But I think if you're a generalist, you're rarely without work. The only problem with that is that if you're a generalist, you're never going to be able to necessarily get to the level that a specialist can with any one given bit of software. I mean, my main focuses have generally been Mari, Substance, and Maya. But I mean, I've done a bit of ZBrush work. I've done some Nuke. I've kind of played around in other little bits and pieces.
It's almost like you've got your own specialism within the general role. And I think only in these areas.
No, exactly, and that's the route I wanted to go down, because I felt that it was always good to have something to fall back on. But at the same time, I didn't want to end up just, I think there are times you can spend 6 months doing modeling, 6 months doing texturing, 6 months doing look dev, and then suddenly you find after a year and a half, you haven't done modeling for a year and a half.
Yeah.
You go back to it and you feel a bit rusty.
Sure.
Whereas being kind of focusing on texturing, but dipping in and out of modeling and look dev and matte painting and stuff now and then, it means that you're still keeping that stuff fresh in your mind, but you're really still focused on the texturing.
Like things around the edges almost, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I think that's really cool. Let's have a look. What is a really good one on here? So Max asks, do you think that software stagnation is an issue within the industry?
I wouldn't say software stagnation is an issue. I'd say that how can I put it? Maybe like the IT department sometimes not keeping up with the kind of latest trends can be an issue. So not latest trends, but I'll give you a prime example is that when I was at DNEG, we were using, I think 2 versions back of Mari. And I mean, in some respects, that wasn't a problem, because it meant that the pipeline worked really nicely. It meant that everybody knew what they were doing and how to use the software. But the second they upgraded to the later version, everybody had to kind of get retrained in it.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't say I wouldn't say stagnation is an issue, because people are always updating. I actually think
just gaps, isn't there, between the updates?
That's the problem, and obviously that's down to the fact that the IT departments always have to make sure that they are able to solve any problem within a given bit of software. And so when a new bit of software is released, or a new version is released, they have to get up to speed with, you know, how to fix all the new problems that might occur. But I mean, I say that I think one of the big problems that it's not really a problem, but one of the things I found is that you quite often find with in-house software that there are people who wanted to test a new bit of in-house software, but obviously they were testing it on a film.
Yeah.
And thinking, well, this is a tentpole movie.
Give it a go. It might not work.
Yeah, and there were a couple of times it didn't work.
Oh my
but you know, again, being professionals as artists, we all made sure that we kind of knew the workarounds and knew how to, you know, optimize our work efficiently.
Yeah,
but,
no, definitely.
I think that sometimes in-house software can be a bit of a problem, but again, without in-house software, you know, the job becomes a lot harder, because the in-house software often is the one that will solve the hardest problems.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. So one last question, because you must be tired. You're like making you talk a lot.
Right.
And this is just one that I'm keen on knowing the answer to, and I think it might be Jurassic Park, but I'm not sure. But if you could go back and work on one film in history that you haven't worked on already, what would you pick? Like, if you could go back and do that VFX or that build, what would you choose?
That's a lot of films to pick from.
I'm just trying to guess, but
I mean, Jurassic Park's definitely up there.
Yeah.
I think it possibly. Let's think. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan would be a good one. I actually think Galaxy Quest would probably be Galaxy Quest or Stargate are my two.
Oh wow, you really are into your sci-fi. I don't know them.
So,
but I can imagine that you did a fantastic job.
Galaxy Quest, if you've not seen it, it is unreally so good. It's got Alan Rickman in it. I mean,
Snape, isn't it? Is that Snape?
Yeah. Snape,
yeah, you can't see. I just go straight. I would work on Harry Potter if I could go back and work on any film. I can't work on any film.
Which one?
Probably The Goblet of Fire. Or Fantastic
I love
Beasts,
the first one.
Yeah. You can't go wrong really with all the exploration of new characters, and I do love
the whole Christmas thing with the floating candles.
It's beautiful, isn't it? You worked on Fantastic Beasts, didn't you, as well?
Yeah. I worked on the first one.
I think that film. That's just insane, isn't it? That first film. So I'm jealous. I'm just seeing if anyone's written anything in the chat before I let go. So awesome film is Galaxy Quest, and that was Nikki as a tutor here. Also the main villain in both Prince of Thieves and Die Hard.
Yeah.
Alan Rickman.
Mr. Takagi won't be joining us for the rest of his life.
That's the one. Azkaban is the best Harry Potter. Oh, controversial here. Controversial. Oh, it is good. But I love the Triwizard Tournament. I just think that is genius.
Hellboy, I was a runner. I was a runner on Hellboy. But I did go to the amazing after party.
I love
that was a good after party.
I love that all the way through your presentation was kind of like, and then there was a party, and then you got to meet this person, because a lot of these guys will love that. You know, that the idea of one day going to those things.
I mean, I think that the parties make it. I would say they make it worth it. Obviously, seeing your work on screen makes it worth it, but it's a really nice thing at the end to kind of everybody just kind of take a breather, have a drink, have some food.
Yeah.
But the Hellboy 2 rap party was
it insane?
Whoa.
Louise asked, did you meet Seth? And I'm guessing that's McFarlane, because you're obsessed with him, aren't you, Louise?
No, I didn't meet. No, sadly not. I do like Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah.
What do you think of stop motion? I love stop motion. I've not done it for many years. I think the last time I did it was at my cousin's house. When my older, I've got a cousin who's now must be like in his mid-50s now, but he had an old kind of video camera, and we used to go around and get Lego and stuff and do stop motion like that.
Yeah.
I love stop motion. I love model stuff. I think it's cool. I don't do it myself, but Lord of the Rings, some of the model stuff in that is amazing.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? You still watch those films. I still watch them now and think they look amazing. I'm sure some bits are a bit cringe, but those bits don't look cringe. You know, the actual models, they still look amazing.
They really hold up.
Yeah.
On the Jeep. Yep.
Yes. We had Aardman in last year, didn't we? We had
oh, cool.
Yeah, Will Betcher, who directed Farmageddon, and that was really cool to kind of hear from like claymation, because like I think it's moved on a lot since then, but I love the fact Aardman stick with it.
Well, they do. I know there's a lot of crossover as well now with VFX.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, like is it Kubo? It's got a mixture of 3D and.
Yeah.
I think they're looking so good these days, aren't they?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
We also had Tim Allen in a few months ago, who actually worked on nearly every Wes Anderson stop motion film, and I was just like, oh, and he was like, oh, in Wes World, and I was like, Wes World? You're talking about Wes Anderson, and you know, people just name drop. I'm just so jealous, but yeah. Al, you've been an absolute pleasure. I wish I could talk to you for like another 2 hours. But yeah, and I'm sure you have better things to do, like dinner time soon in your house, I'm sure, with your two.
I don't know. Amazingly, I haven't heard anything from downstairs. Normally I'd hear screaming.
That's insane. Yeah,
my son will be home now, so I don't know. I'd normally expect he's probably sitting downstairs watching Power Rangers or something.
Oh, yeah, still, that's okay. Although actually, I don't like the yellow and pink kind of girls. Yeah, okay, I don't like Power Rangers.
I used to a long time ago.
Back in the day.
Yeah. But, can I just answer this one question? I've just noticed. Is there a way to work on your 3D software skills if you can't get hold of it? No, not necessarily. But what I would say is that if you can't get hold of the software, practice your drawing skills, because drawing is absolutely, you know, immense. Most software companies now do student versions. So like Maya, Substance packages. You can get a lot of these with the student. I've got them because I'm a teacher now. So
you can actually get mine for free, can't you?
Exactly.
As a student. So Lily, ask Nikki or Jake about that next week, because they'll tell you how to do it. I think it's probably using your .ac.uk email address, to be honest. If you're ever wondering why the free things aren't working, it's because you need to use that address. Isn't it? It's always that. AC.uk. It helps you get so much discount. Not that I would know, because I don't do that. Maybe. But yeah, I really hope to get you back again. I think you're fantastic and you've inspired everyone, and you've been such a good final guest, Al.
Thanks very much for having me.
Save the best till last.
I'm honoured.
No, honestly, you've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I hope everybody enjoyed it, and yeah.
They did. I think that's the most questions I've ever had this week.
Hopefully at some point I'll see everybody, or see people in the industry, and
yes. Maybe next year you can come to Nottingham.
That would be cool.
That would be so cool. But I'll be in touch. But yeah, thank you so much. I'll say goodbye and I'll let you go enjoy your evening. Cheers. It was lovely to meet you, Al. Bye, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Cheers.